Hi everyone, Robert Keogh here from SmartTech. Here we are today to talk about AI and impact in cybersecurity, specifically in the aviation industry. And I have the great pleasure of being joined by the very experienced Ben Hellis. Maybe Ben, you could introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, yeah, Ben here. I run the security automation team here at SmartTech. Interact with a whole bunch of our different customers, including those in the aviation department, and obviously AI is a really big part of that. So happy to jump into the topics today.
Yes, well, I guess we can start with the news that is on everyone's mind, of course, the recent and very impactful kind of Collins Aerospace cyber incident. We did have some very interesting development yesterday where the Everest ransomware gang announced or like claimed responsibility. Now they listed that they documented, excuse me, that they had 50 gigs worth of internal documents, kind of looking through the post that they put on their dark website. It seems they have database access to multiple Postgres databases, to Excel documents. So they've gotten quite a large amount of data. There's definitely some customer PII information inside there, names, email addresses, and so forth, as well as like internal flight information on computers. They have now, I think there's 3 days and a few hours left before they release all the files, unless of course Collins Aerospace pay the ransom, which seems unlikely at this stage. They do have a note specifically for the CEO, quite unusually. But I guess this is a great example of AI being used in cyber attacks. And, you know, even though it was a malware attack, and there has actually been an arrest, maybe this is maybe something that people don't know, there was an arrest in the UK of somebody already for this. But it is definitely a sign of like how these industries are being attacked and the bad guys are using actors. So maybe Ben, just to start with, like, how are you seeing AI being used now? What's an interesting use case you've come across?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is a perfect example of just kind of AI accelerating things, right? Making it simpler and easier for attackers to do their job, for want of a better term. But to give a slightly more non-just, hey, attackers are attacking people kind of answer, an interesting use case I've seen recently is around people actually using AI to apply for jobs. Which I thought was an odd one, but if you think about it, the kind of job screening process used to be somebody sitting there with a big stack of papers. They'd come along, they'd filter through them, pick the ones they want to move forward to interviews, and off you go. And then new systems came out, HR processes improved, and then you've got a system that scans them and just picks out keywords. If you have the right keywords, off you go. And now, of course, we've got AIs who are doing the same thing, parsing through huge amounts of data and deciding who looks like the best candidates. But of course, people who are applying for jobs, they're also got access to AI now. So you're seeing them go and kind of fire off customized CVs and cover letters for every role that they see, and able to apply for hundreds and thousands of roles, whereas, traditionally they wouldn't have the time or energy to do that. So you're kind of getting into that sort of in cybersecurity, we say, the threat actors are all using AI, so we need to use AI in defense as well to keep up with it. And this is that exact concept playing out in a completely different environment, which I think is quite interesting as a whole.
Yeah, it's definitely something hiring managers have noticed. All right, is that increase in the number of applications and they're still, I would say, low effort.
Yeah.
It's just low effort for them because they just have to use the AI to bring it. But yeah, it's very, very interesting topic, I guess, in general, AI and cybersecurity and aviation. The aviation industry, is one of those very regulated industries. There's a lot of like both in terms of like just aviation regulation, but of course now they are also, because they are a critical industry according to NIS 2. It has a large impact on them, and maybe you could touch a little bit about the impact of that EU regulation, I guess, specifically is having on the aviation industry.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, realistically, there's a couple of different ways that it impacts. First is, as you mentioned, regulation, right? The anything to do with AI has to be heavily regulated. You really have to be able to kind of justify what the AI systems are doing it, why they're doing it, are they necessary? There's a lot of hoops and steps to go through to make sure, AI and the data it collects are being used correctly. And then there's also the side of it where you're looking at technology advances. AI is streaming ahead. Every month it's like leaps and bounds stronger and better. And that means that there's a lot of people interested in making these AIs work for them. And there's been some really interesting use cases, particularly in aviation spaces, where when you think of risk reduction, right? Using AIs to monitor kind of health, well-being, things like that, which is a heavy regulated part of the EU AI Act. So specifically, you can't, right? Is the is the general gist of it. You're not allowed to monitor people's actions or emotions, but there is a kind of a provision in there unless it's for health and safety. And obviously, when you're dealing with something like a flight, there's big safety aspect there. So one of those use cases that's being kind of looked at the moment is around monitoring pilots for things like fatigue, stress, cognitive overload, illness that maybe isn't necessarily coming up and through regular checks, and that might directly have an impact on flight safety. So obviously, there's clear benefits to these things. But with what these technologies can do, there's a huge regulatory barrier there. And the AI Act in the EU is specifically designed to have very strict barriers there. There's a lot of burden on the compliance. You need to be out to kind of demonstrate that the system is strictly being used for these purposes, right? It's definitely for safety and safety alone. That data isn't being used for any other purpose. It's got a very clearly defined scope. The data is handled correctly, and there's also kind of ethical safeguards there that are really designed to make sure that this isn't used for nefarious purposes, right? We've all seen those kind of dystopian futures where the computers decide everything, and that's not where anybody wants to really go. And so, these are really important kind of guardrails, but that also slows down progress, right? Sometimes, there's that question: is it worth the effort? Is it worth the overhead to implement these things? And where safety is concerned, generally speaking, yes, it is worth the overhead. But obviously, these are topics that every company out there, aviation or not, is really looking at the moment. Like, how do we maximize AI, and how do we minimize cost and risk of using it, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a very like interesting use case, this pilot monitoring, because I guess there has been for like decades, in fact, there's been calls for, particular, as you mentioned, like this fatigue monitoring of pilots with CCTV, but it hasn't happened. But
Yeah.
I wonder now, will AI really change this? Because people will perhaps, as AI becomes more ubiquitous, that it will effectively be demanded by consumers that, okay, hey, they're not going to fly on a plane unless they have this confidence that this is being implemented inside the cockpit.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right. If you're given the option of this is a vehicle with safety controls and this is a vehicle without, which one are you going to take? And
Yeah,
that's when you think, okay, well, you're in a tin can in the air. People are afraid. There's a lot of people who fly even though they're worried about it, and any extra safety you can put in is a really strong benefit there, in my opinion.
exactly. I definitely think this could be one of those differentiators that aviation companies could use to differentiate themselves what they could then call like legacy aviation, companies by implementing this and kind of giving that, uh, warm and fuzzy feeling to
Yeah,
people that
yeah,
say, "Hey guys, we're on top of this."
absolutely.
Maybe just to talk about like then the more practical side of AI, and of course, Smart Tech here we have like multiple partners working in the AI and aviation sectors. So could you talk a little bit about the kind of the human impact and how AI has impacted analyst workflows?
Yeah, definitely. So ultimately, I think the best way to look at it is in the key kind of framework of trust. Like, how do you trust AI?
Mm,
And a lot of people are worried, right? AI is going to come and take my job. AI is going to replace all the people. But that's not really how it's panning out, right? The AI is coming in as kind of a force multiplier. The people are still needed in that process. So instead of kind of AIs removing them, they're making them more efficient. We're still much better than AIs at many, many things, right? AIs are just really good at churning through data, that they can do fairly well. But there's kind of a downside to that, and that's they're not really they don't really know what they're doing, right? They predict what you want to hear and what sounds right given the context. They don't really know things. But the downside is when they're wrong, they're really, really confident about how wrong they are, right? They'll just keep firing through. They think they're right at all times. And so you can't necessarily fully trust them. You need people in there to kind of spot check and kind of fact check almost, make sure that what they're doing is correct. In any line where a system is making a decision, the chance of those false positives is pretty severe. There's big major downsides. But when you're looking at both cybersecurity and aviation in general, or any critical infrastructure really, if a hallucination isn't just a false alarm, it's potentially a operational shutdown or disconnecting a network or something like that. That has real world impact to people, to bottom lines, to everything. So you have to have some kind of safety catch in there that doesn't just let the system go off blindly on its own. You can't just inherently trust it. And speaking of regulations earlier, that piece about being able to justify why a decision was made, why an action was taken, it's not likely regulators are going to be happy with, oh well, the AI just decided, right? There's
yeah,
going to have to be some level of, we use this to make an informed decision, and this is the decision we made, not just we let it do what it wanted. So ultimately that means you really do have to have people in that pipeline. You have to have people involved in both designing the systems, obviously, but also making sure they're following the correct path, what they're supposed to be doing. I like to think of them as a kind of like a really, 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 really fast like analyst or junior level interns, like those kind of roles where traditionally in business people would come in and they'd be given, here's all the pile of work nobody likes to do. Just work through this spreadsheet for 8 hours and go and make me some coffee, right? AI is not making
yeah,
you the coffee, but it's going to be really good at just putting in the hours and flying through those sheets. But you're never going to rely on an intern to make a final business decision, and that's kind of how we should
absolutely.
be treating the AIs in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit it exactly. This force multiplier, it really is in my opinion, the key takeaway there. That like it was interesting even seeing like there's some of these companies that adopted AI, like 2 years ago, kind of like at the bleeding edge, like Clara, and now have like rolled back. So they let go people and they let go all of these experienced people, and now they have to roll it back because they're figuring out, okay, hey, the AI doesn't actually understand. You still need somebody with that domain knowledge that understands like the risks and the context and the broader environment. So it's very interesting to see these companies rolling back and saying, no, AI is great, but it only will make a human better. Like
Yeah.
it's only this force multiplier. So very interesting.
Yeah, you want to be AI empowered, not just AI powered.
Eh,
It's
I,
empowerment, not just
yeah.
running everything.
Yeah, I guess there are some very specific like challenges in aviation because it's like one of the most like connected environments. In many companies, manufacturing companies, like a big food manufacturing company, and they make pasta, and they'd have their IT network on one side, and then they'd have their manufacturing OT network at another side. But of course, that's not possible in the aviation industry because I guess everybody wants to know where their luggage is. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. And I have to say, when nowadays, when I'm taking flights, if I'm on a flight that tells me, "Hey, your luggage has just gone on board," and hey, it's a great weight off your mind. Nobody wants to arrive somewhere and not have their luggage. I think the biggest use case for people getting those kind of like e-tags so they can track the thing is luggage going missing, right? But it's a perfect example. So many key systems are integrated in aviation nowadays, but people really want to be part of that. They want to see those data points. They want to understand where it's all going. And so these are all what would traditionally be OT environments that have to, by, necessitates being interconnected. And it's not just interconnected to people, it's interconnected between airports, between countries. There's so much interconnectivity and so many different systems that have to integrate in. And of course, that's all a security risk, right? There's always the chance of things getting into an OT network, which are much harder to monitor. There's much less visibility there. And it's, if everybody could, they'd be like, oh, well, no, there's no access at all. But we have to allow that access. And so that is a challenge. And especially, obviously with the AI topic, that's an area where maybe there's not a lot of training data, there's not a lot of information for the AI. So, again, that brings back that, how do we trust them? Are they going to detect things? Again, you need specialists, somebody who understands what an alert in an OT environment means and how critical that is versus somebody who deals with IT. You see a lot of companies ramp up their IT, OT, this big interconnectivity, but it's the same people who manage their normal IT security who are making decisions, and that causes issues on the ground. The guys working in the plants, working in the operation environment, they just don't have confidence that the security team is doing what they need. And so it is a big challenge bringing those people in, skilling those people up. You're probably not thinking very often that the guy who operates a plant needs to become potentially an AI expert, right? But perhaps his input is needed. And again, that all was as we kind of put this all into the big boiling pot. It's it can be messy, and so it's a tough roadmap to kind of focus on. But it is ultimately, you need to get ahead of it. It is something that has to be on your thought process. What happens when somebody gets into our OT environment? What happens when these systems get breached? Because there's no point trying to figure it out after it happens.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely a key takeaway from today's session is this like incident response and recover. And maybe I would even go like the Collins Aerospace, like to continue your point, is maybe a great example of a, like, if I think what is the learning from that, and I would say there's two key things that I would take from that learning. One is that while they did have a disaster recovery in place and they did implement that disaster recovery and they did recover, what happened was they got reinfected. And so like that means that tells you immediately that like not their entire, they didn't have complete visibility over their entire infrastructure. So there were devices that were connected that didn't have an endpoint agent on them. And so that endpoint agent was still infected, and then that endpoint agent started spreading it out, spreading that malware internally, the Muse malware again.
Yeah.
Even though I know it was like interesting to see how the Belgium airport ultimately they had to rip out everything, all of the terminals, all of the laptops, and replace everything in order to completely clean the network. So they had to, while they had planned on doing this, they had to like accelerate it by several months just to get past the breach. So maybe that's one I would suggest
Yeah.
is that disaster recovery and like ensuring that you have visibility. If you don't know what you have, and if you don't have that endpoint protection, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You're going to be on the front page of news, and nobody wants that. Because aviation is definitely being a critical industry. When something goes wrong, it is very public, and so definitely is something you need that visibility. I guess the other thing I would definitely recommend is to trial these recoveries, because when people have backups, they often think they have backups, but what they don't have, what they really have is hope, hope that those backups work. Because unless you test them, you can't really be confident that your entire system can recover. And we've seen a whole bunch of that recently where people have backups, but they're not complete or they don't back up some critical system. So this is the other recommendation I would give. I don't know, do you want to chime in, Ben? Do you have any other recommendations that you would give?
Yeah, I would like I won't kind of go over the same points, although I do want to quickly note on that point that I think this is a great use case for what can happen during an attack, because this is not only the infrastructure itself that had the problem, but it also had that knock-on effect to so many airports that we're using that as a supplier, right? That for them, it's a supplier risk issue, right? It's like one of our suppliers got hacked and that's causing disruption to our business. Whereas, normally you don't see them in that kind of scope. You hear about these things very abstractly, but it's such a very clear and easy way. It's like that happened, and then airports had these problems. Flights got delayed, cancelled. People lost their trips. Refunds were done. Like it was a huge impact because of that supply chain piece. But to go on to the area I would have as a recommendation, I'll go with a slightly different area. I'll go around security awareness. Security awareness programs are always key. Everybody likes to say that we as people are the weak link, right? But realistically, I like to think of them as the strongest link as well. You need to create an awareness program that makes people comfortable around discussing security, discussing what's happened. They need to be comfortable to come forward and say, hey, I think I messed up. I think I did something. I think I clicked something. That lets you kick off an investigation way earlier than when the infection happens. But you also need to look outside of the normal realm of what we think of as awareness, right? Most of the time, it's don't click links and clean your desk at the end of the day. That's the general gist of most people's day one security awareness. But now AI is in the bubble. We need to really be understanding what that can do, what that powers. To bring it back around to my opening unique use case around people applying for jobs with AI. This goes further, right? There are plenty of cases out there now of threat actors using AI to apply for jobs. Then they'll go through multiple interviews, trying again with a different face, a different voice, again and again until they've learned the interview process for this particular company. They get a job. They use the AIs to semi-automate enough of the work that they're not about to get fired. They sit there, they collect a paycheck, they're costing you money without doing good work, and they're an insider threat now. You've got a threat actor who's just sitting in your network, slowly bleeding off money, waiting for the day where they need to do something or they need to trigger an attack, right? And all of that because potentially the HR team didn't even know that this was a possibility. So, it was a bit weird that the guy waited 5 seconds before answering every question, or his camera was flickering kind of unusually, or there was something odd about the picture. They may just brush them off as a bad connection. But in reality, that could be the indicator they need to look at this application a second time and really, be sure that this is a real person. And there's plenty of other cases like this, but I think bringing awareness of how quickly the security world is evolving with AIs is just key. People have to be aware, because it's not just the security team that has to deal with security, right? It's everybody. Everybody has to be part of that culture in a business for success.
Absolutely. That word culture, I think, is incredibly important, because that's something you've just got to embed in the entire ways of working, and got to start at the top, and work down, that being able to say, hey, I see a problem, and knowing what to do and being confident that knowing that reporting it is the right thing to do is an incredibly powerful tool for a company to have. We could talk for days, I think, but I know we have to wrap up. So yeah, maybe just one other note, just to say, as part of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, everyone who joined the webinar today has been entered into a draw for a zero-day con ticket. So zero-day con, for those who don't know, is Ireland's largest cybersecurity event, which takes place next year in April 26th. In Dublin. Hopefully we will see you all there, and we will contact the winners at the end. And also, I believe there's one more LinkedIn Live session for the retail industry specifically, and I will be joined by the always interesting to talk to Ronan Murphy. So I'm already looking forward to that. But I want to say again, thank you, Ben, for joining me today. It's been fantastic as always having a discussion with you.
No, been a pleasure. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and talk again soon. Cheers.
Thanks all.